Hello, I'm Nathan Hartman, and I'm just providing a video that's going to talk a little bit about how we map traits and skills and make predictions about their impact on individual, team, and organization level performance. I think this is important. It's a value that equips aspiring managers and actual managers with a practical framework with understanding how traits influence in performance, but also team and organizational outcomes. Unlike a traditional approach, which just assumes that some trait is good and some trait is bad, it's asking us to think about how the existence of low, medium, and high levels of the trait, and also possession of the trait in a team environment or an organizational environment, might have benefits, no benefit, or a negative benefit. Using this approach is scalable right across multiple levels of the organization. While we know we can do this, it's probably not very often that the average manager is using this approach to their own disadvantage, right? They're just trying to fix the immediate demand and thinking a little bit about how things fit together and how individual traits and skills of employees might equal better performance for themselves, the team, or the organization, or not, can help solve these problems on the long term. This is distinctive as today's workplace is becoming more collaborative and more autonomous. Employees are empowered to amongst themselves adapt to the rapidly changing environments, and where the wrong trait might be amplified or can hinder performance, as people could be paralyzed and not know how to take action on their own. In the more empowered environments, we need to think about who's going to be best suited for this kind of autonomous, remote, and potentially high flex work. For future managers, this perspective fosters better decision making and hiring, development, and team leadership by promoting the alignment between a person's strengths and a broader connection with the organizational goals. It's essential for determining if the traits that people possess actually add up to improved team and organizational performance versus the trait is just good or bad, right? The ultimate question is, does the performance of the individual lead to improved outcomes for the work group? And ultimately, does that lead to higher revenue, higher success rates with customers? Does it actually mean something in terms of dollar and cents for the organization? In this video, we'll talk a little bit about employees and their performance. As you know, every employee brings a unique set of traits to work, how that can impact how they think, how they act, and also how they interact with other people. As a manager, it's our job or their job to know whether those traits like decisiveness or openness to feedback will actually improve performance. So when we're thinking of employees and where to utilize them inside the organization, we're also making predictions about how their individual makeup will interact with the environment and how those interactions will result in behaviors and how those behaviors will relate into the ultimate performance of the person, the team, and the organization, if not the department. So let's start with some basics, right? There are traits like conscientiousness, cognitive flexibility, a growth mindset that are consistently linked to better performance and are things that we know we should say we are possessing or interested in having, but also are things we're saying that we want our employees to also possess because they help motivate the person, right? They become self-motivated. They're more intrinsically motivated, more detail-oriented. People with these traits are also more adaptable to challenges, and they're more prepared to learn from experiences or challenges they face in the workplace. But there's a good catch, right? Or there's an issue. What's good for one employee may not scale up to being good for the team or for the organization. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go further in the video. When managers are thinking about employee traits or skills, they generally ask themselves at least three questions. Will the trait or skill improve how the person does their job? Will the trait help or hinder their ability to collaborate with team members, leadership, customers, or other stakeholders? And will the trait support or undermine the organization's culture and goals? So if we had, for example, an employee named Alex who had a strong growth mindset, that might be representative of a person who's always looking to improve. Alex is always asking for feedback and embrace challenges. The growth mindset not only helps her perform, but also creates a positive learning climate for her team. Another employee with the personality or skill trait of having a desire for independence. Let's say that person's named Jordan. The independent nature helps them take initiative. But in a collaborative setting, the desire for independence might make this employee resistant to input from other people and create a type of friction, right? Making it more difficult to collaborate. So the independence trait for Jordan boosts their individual performance, but might hurt or maybe at minimum not improve team performance. So if we look at what we call a trait impact map, right, we could create a plot where the y-axis is the performance, and on the x-axis are the traits like decisiveness, open-mindedness, or maybe things like scattered thinking or being scatterbrained. And then if we thought a little bit about different colors or different symbols representing individual impact and team impact and organizational impact, we could use our recognition for research where we have correlations between variables. When one is low, the performance is low, and when one is high, the performance is high. We might be able to make some predictions about whether these traits have a unique contribution in a positive way for this employee, or maybe has no impact, or has, like in the Alex and Jordan example, they might have an impact for individual and team performance, but in the other instance for Jordan, might have an impact that is good for the individual, but not so great for the team. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. So there are lots of traits we can consider in an organization. In today's workforce, with the autonomous working, the more empowered workplace, people working from high flex, remote environments, there's a lot of interest in people with growth instead of fixed mindsets. And so as you can see here, a growth mindset is the belief that people are adaptable, they can learn from effort, they embrace challenges, they see failure as learning opportunities, they continue trying to advance, they don't ever rest in sort of seeing themselves as a fixed product, but they're always trying to polish and improve and grow. And so if you're sort of seeing the fixed mindset, right? Failure is an opportunity to learn versus the fixed mindset. The growth mindset is failure is an opportunity to learn, whereas failure is the limit of my ability, showing the things that I can do or not do, which is in the fixed mindset, not liking to be challenged. Either I'm good at it or I'm not, are just common statements that we might hear some of the fixed mindset say. And if you just think about people inside an organization where the workplace is changing, we're adapting to new technology. Now we have to work sometimes in person, sometimes in remote, or sometimes in any combination of working in groups, working individually, working with customers, that we can see that there are statements associated with the growth mindset that just seem a little bit more interesting to us as a manager. The question is, we don't necessarily know how it relates to performance, and so we'll talk about that on the next slide. So as we look at this chart here, we're going to use the blue dot to sort of represent the growth mindset. And so we're asking ourselves, how well does it relate to the individual impact? So on the x-axis, or the trait axis, we're having to make some hypothesis about how well someone who possesses the growth mindset would actually perform, which is on the y-axis. And so we might take little pictures in our mind of people that we see inside the organization, and there's little ghost images of employees here. And if we see in the jobs that we're leading that people who seem to embody the definition and behaviors of someone with a growth mindset as being higher up on there in the graph, and people who are having less and more of a fixed mindset being lower, then we're basically saying that there's a positive relationship for the growth mindset, meaning that the more someone possesses a growth mindset, the more we expect their performance to increase. So in the dot we're seeing here, there's sort of a representation of the middle amount. So there's a middle amount of a growth mindset, so there's a medium amount of the trait, and there's also a medium amount of performance. Okay, so in this instance, we're starting to think a little bit about individual performance. So we're mapping the trait to its impact on individual performance, and if it's linear, like the blue dots here, as the growth mindset increases, we see examples in our team and our organization where people who possess the growth mindset actually perform at a higher level. Those with a moderate amount or a less pronounced, a medium amount of the growth mindset perform at a medium or an acceptable level. And then people with little or no growth mindset, they tend to be at the lower level. Now the question becomes, where does the team performance fit in? And this is where it becomes tricky for the managers to understand the full system. So I have to ask myself, how many tasks can individual people accomplish with the growth mindset? They accomplish more. So we're basically pretty clear in this instance that performance leads to increased individual performance. But now when we have team requirements, so let's say our team of business analysts, they support 10 customers. So as the growth mindset people are working in a team of people with higher and lower levels of growth mindset, are we able to see the team address or help more customers? So in January, if there's 10 customers, are there 15 customers in July and 20 customers being well served by teams with one or two people with the growth mindset in our organization? So are we able to improve the performance of the team by adding simply a couple of people with the high growth mindset? Or, right, do I need to have a more universal, like, does it have to be a predominantly growth mindset group that has more customers, more complex projects, more performance, more billable hours, those kinds of things? So we're asking ourselves in this map, how well does this trait not only impact the individual performance, but how much does it add up to what the team can perform, right? And so then we have to then ask ourselves, does the individual impact and the team impact add up to something that improves the revenue or the profit that the organization is able to attain? So as growth mindset teams take on more challenging tasks, are they able to bill at a higher level? Are they able to take the same contract and complete it in a shorter amount of time, thereby increasing the amount of profit that the organization is able to create? And so as we think about these kinds of things, we have to sort of think about which types of traits we're interested in our employees possessing, and then we have to map them to think about how well they relate to not just the performance of the individual, but do they, in constellation or in a system, do individual traits, when strong, do they impact or improve team performance? And do those things also impact organizational performance? Okay, so on this slide, we're basically going along the assumption that as I increase the number of growth mindset people on a team, the team is able to handle more complex projects, do them more quickly, take on larger, more profitable projects. And so that improves organizational performance. And then the more medium amounts of growth mindset on the teams, the fewer customers they're able to do, but still might be an okay level of performance, but the amount of profit that team generates would be less. And then, of course, the teams without a growth mindset or a low amount of growth mindset individuals on it isn't doing as well, and as a result isn't as contributing as strongly to the organization. So the question then becomes, what do we do as managers? And so when we're thinking in terms of bringing people into the organization, and we're thinking about maybe who are going to be good recruiters for us, who are going to be good screeners for us, who are going to be good examples of those who embody the type of employee that we want to bring inside the organization, right? We're going to look to the top performers who happen to be, right, working on the top teams and also have the highest level of growth mindset. So when someone brings to us a recommendation of an employee who can potentially perform well inside the organization, we're going to ask ourselves, how well does this potential employee match the growth mindset model of other employees when they first started? And we might actually use the recommendations for new hires or references from the high performers, from the high growth mindset people more often, because they might be better able to judge who are similar to them, who have the same characteristics that match performance, and better understand what the growth mindset brings to the organization. And so we're thinking about these kinds of things. We're thinking a little bit about the predictability, the visualization, the sort of system connection of what employee behavior actually means. So if employees are cooperative, if they're decisive, if they have a growth mindset, if they're mentally flexible, right? Do those people perform better in the jobs that I manage? If I manage those jobs and they perform well individually, do those traits extrapolate to performing well in a team? And when the individual performance increases and the team performance increases, does it actually benefit the overall organization? And when it does, then I try to maximize the existence of those people in my organization with each hire to try to improve, right, the presence of those traits, the functioning of the teams become easier to manage, more predictable, and the customers become better served, and that begins to separate us from our customers who potentially are not as focused in creating teams where the culture is representative of the way in which we want to perform and think individually, which can't perform as teams as quickly, strongly, as decisively as they can in our organization, and can't basically deliver either the projects at the price, the speed, or the quality that we can, because we're able, now that we see the relationships between the traits our employees have and the performance they give, right, we have a better idea of the types of people to bring in and what place to put them on to give them a big impact inside the organization. Okay, so now we're thinking about organizational behavior. We're using the same basic idea that we were using with the trait map, except now we have a larger picture. There's an existing body of knowledge and research in the field of organizational behavior, and we know the same thing, that there are individual outcomes, there are team or group level outcomes, and there are also organizational level outcomes. And instead of traits, they're inputs and processes that have some impact on performance. So what we have to ask ourselves are, what individual inputs are we maximizing inside our organization that improve individual performance? And then what are the moderating processes that, or mechanisms that exist in management inside the organization in relation to the individual that improves that individual performance? The same thing is going to be true for the group level and the organizational level, that we're thinking about, right? Is there a theory? Is there a term? Is there a concept that we could adopt as a manager that would speed up our understanding of individual performance, group level performance, and even ultimately organizational level performance? But we have to do the same type of thing that we did with the individual trait map, right? What are the variables? What are the inputs? What are the processes that we are levering on, that we're leveraging, that we're manipulating, that we're changing, that we're enhancing, that are going to somehow improve performance inside the organization? And this is what you'll try to understand as you learn more about leadership, motivation, individual differences, right? Human resource management, organizational structure, and organizational culture. All of those have some impact on employee behavior, and those behaviors have some impact on how teams function and how organizations function. And the more streamlined we can make those in relation to the customer's demands and the price they're willing to pay, the better we are able to compete. The better able we are to compete, the more we're able to offer in terms of support to individuals, to teams, to the organization as a whole, the more we're able to reinforce the existence of those things that are improving individual, team, and organizational performance. And then the cycle continues. The more that we can do that, the more we can enhance, the more we begin to separate ourselves from the competition, and the more successful we become as managers, teams, organizations over the long run.